Divorce, renovation, hard conversations, uncertainty. Today we're going to get real with the attorney and author Renée Bauer. You're going to leave here with clarity, courage, and the next steps. Before we start, please follow and subscribe and leave a five-star review so more people can get a clear, practical guidance. I'm going to start that over again because I didn't like the way I did that. Okay, one, two, three. Divorce, renovation, hard conversations, uncertainty. Today, we're going to get real with the attorney and author Renée Bauer. So you leave here with clarity, courage, and the next steps on what to do. Before we start, please tap, follow, and subscribe and leave a five-star review so more people can get clear, practical guidance. Now, welcome back to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi, where insight becomes action. By the end of this episode, you're going to know how to approach divorce decisions wisely, how to renovate your life with confidence, and how to handle the hardest conversations without blowing up everything. Now, Renée, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. I really would love to know more about you. And, it just blows me away all the things that you've accomplished. And I really want to hear more about you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Stacey. Right back at you. I mean, your resume is goes on and on and on and so impressive. So I share the love right back at you. So I've been a divorce lawyer for over 20 years now. My firm is in Connecticut, but I am also twice divorced. And for a really long time, I did my job as the buttoned up lawyer and I'd go to court and I'd be all professional. And I'd come home and I'd kick off my heels, and I was so broken because I had shame from two divorces. I never talked about them. There was stigma around it. So here I am, a professional doing the work and haven't quite figured out how to cope with what divorce meant for my life on the other side of it. And then one day I went on a friend's podcast. She had just started one and she's like, listen, I have a podcast. I'm going to have you on as a guest. She's like, I'll bring some sushi over. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, sushi. And we made some drinks and we ate. And then she clips a mic on me and starts asking questions. And for the first time ever, I started talking about divorce in a really raw, authentic way. And when her episode dropped, I had many women reach out to me and say, thank you for talking about it. Thank you for putting words to how I felt. And I realized I need to actually talk about divorce. I need to put aside my ego, thinking that everyone was judging, and talk about it in the public in an open forum to help people and remove that stigma. And it's funny what happens when you do that is you no longer have the shame associated with it when you talk through that and you face it. All of that disappears, and I no longer was that broken version of myself. So that's what I spend my time when I'm not lawyering or writing or speaking,
Yeah.
telling my story and talking about divorce and hoping we can help even one person make that decision to go for what they want in their life or not accept that relationship that no longer serves them so they can live the life that's aligned, that where they're happy. I mean, that's ultimately what everyone wants.
Oh, 100%. Now, what's the biggest myth about divorce that you want to retire right now?
It's the end. Like divorce, it's funny because everyone goes into their marriage thinking that they're going to last forever, and then they find themselves getting divorced, and it feels like the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah.
And I think, from doing this for a long time, I think the stigma, I think the young people actually have a better grasp of like, hey, this is something that's happened and it's not everything that defines us. And I grew up in a generation where I was the first in the whole family of all my relatives to ever get divorced, and you don't do that. My parents are still together and relatives are still together, and there's just shame, like you stick it out. And I think that that's the takeaways. You don't have to stick it out. You don't have to stay miserably in something that isn't a good fit anymore. And you don't need a big reason. You don't need, like, people think it's an affair or it's toxic or it's abusive in order to walk away from something, but you can simply outgrow the relationship or the person, and that might be enough. Now, I'm not saying like throw in the towel right away, but I'm saying
Yeah.
sometimes in our lives lives, we end up in relationships that might have served us and might have been okay and were fit in our 20s or 30s, but maybe in our 40s and 50s and beyond, it no longer is. And so it's I think give permission to people to recognize that it's okay when it's not working anymore. We have one life to live. And do you
Yeah.
want to turn 80 and say, wow, what would have happened if I chose something differently? And I think that goes for relationships, jobs, any major decision. What would have happened if I went for it or did the thing that was calling me?
Right. Now, if someone is quietly considering divorce, what is the first three smart steps you want them to take before they tell anybody?
Educate yourself. And there are so many resources out there in order to do that. And so I caution people as to the information that does exist in the internet. Some of it, not all of it's good, but there's a lot of it that's really, really good. And educate yourself as to what the process is in your state. What are the decisions you're going to have to make? So often I will have women come to me who aren't the financial people in their marriage and they don't know what the finances look like. They don't know what the retirement accounts look like or what debt looks like. And that's the first step. Start to gather that information and start to wrap your head around what is it that exists, because you can go to a lawyer and the lawyer will represent you, but you still have to take ownership and control over that information so you can make a decision. What I don't want people to do is just say, the lawyer told me this is the best deal I'm going to get, or I should be doing this. You really need to take some control over when you sign that document. It's because you understand it and you recognize that that's the best thing for you, and not because a professional told you that's what you should be doing. And a lot of times we like to pass off that responsibility to the professional, and you shouldn't do that. Not all lawyers are created equal. Sometimes you're going to have lawyers give not so great advice. So go out there and gather all of that information. Have consultations with multiple lawyers, because everyone has different personalities and practices in a different way, and just gather. It's worth the consultation fee if they're charging it to sit down and ask all of your questions.
Right. Oh, that's great advice. Now, how can a couple decide whether mediation, collaboration, divorce, or litigation is the right path?
Yeah, so great question. And the high level of this particular question is you have choices. Divorce doesn't always have to go down the same path. Litigation is going to be your typical traditional things get filed in the court's there, the court sort of moves the process along. That doesn't
Mm.
necessarily mean you're going to end up in trial. That just means you're going through that process in that litigious environment. Then you have mediation, where the couple comes together to a third party neutral who's helping you negotiate a deal. They don't represent either of you, but their job is to help the two of you come to the table and have a conversation and try to get to an agreement. And then the third is the collaborative approach, where each of you is represented, but you're doing it outside of court, and you're again trying to do it in a non-adversarial way, but you have representation helping you. And so, how do you decide? Well, you're going to know better than anyone whether you and your spouse can sit in the same room together and
Yeah.
have a civil conversation. If there's any thoughts that money is being hidden or moved, or something shady is happening with money, it's probably not the best method, because you're going to want a lawyer to dig in and ask for all of the records. But if you say, all right, me and my spouse, we both know what we earn, we're W-2 wage earners, we don't have to value businesses, and we have the same interest in mind, that we don't want to hurt each other, but we just want to resolve things and kind of untangle our life and our assets and custody plan, then it's worth investigating, because you have control over the process, over how long it takes, the cost of it, and ultimately, you don't want a judge telling you what to do with your parenting time, or what happens to the house. It's always better when you can make that decision and have a little bit of control over it. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything you want, but it just means that you get to prioritize what is really important to you. So maybe you're getting the top three things you want, and then you're compromising on the other. And as soon as you go in front of a judge and you have a trial, you lose all control over the outcome as to what happens, because You never know what you get with judges. You have some great judges, you have some not so good judges, you have really experienced judges, you have brand new judges, and you're stuck with what you get.
That's very true. Now, for parents who should we do and say in the first week to help the kids feel safe and supported, like what should we do?
Ah, that's so hard. And it also depends on the age too. So if there's a mental health professional involved, bring them in at this point as in to
Yeah,
ask the question of how do we share the news. What not to do is just blurt it out and not have a game plan where your spouse isn't part of that.
yeah,
I think it's always a bad idea when someone just says, "Well, we're getting divorced, and your father is doing this," and like you're telling things to your kids that are adult conversations that your
yeah.
kids don't need to know. So the goal here is to be a united front, and the messaging here is that it's not your fault, that we love you, that we're not going to burden you with the adult conversations. We're going to take care of everything. We're going to try to create as least disruption as possible so they don't feel that they have to take on the adult emotion. And that happens a lot. And those are the circumstances when you see kids deteriorate, when you see them not do well, when you see their grades slip, or you see behavioral issues when they're thrust into this adult world. So
Yeah.
don't use your children as a best friend or a sounding board or a reason to complain about your ex. That is not like, go to a therapist, go to your lawyer, but do not do that to your children. And sometimes I think when people are in the divorce process, they don't have great boundaries up around their kids.
Yeah, I've seen that many times where they talk to their children like adults, and then the father will say one thing and the mother will say the
Yeah.
other thing, and then they're thinking, "Oh, daddy's the evil one, mommy's the evil
Yeah.
one," and they feel thrown back like a ping pong ball back and forth, and they don't really know what's going on, but they're put in, like you said, in an adult situation where they're really not mentally equipped to handle.
Yeah, and they just want to feel loved by both parents. They don't want to feel like they have to make decisions or have to defend the other parent. And if you have like the word alienation gets used a lot, and sometimes it's valid, a lot of times it's not. A lot of parents like to use that word along with narcissism to say like my spouse is alienating me and they're a narcissist. But
Yeah,
that word alienation comes up when one parent is sort of coaxing or coaching their child and setting it up so that they're against the other parent. And sometimes that happens in a very light way and it sort of settles down. Sometimes it happens in a quite substantial way where it actually impacts the relationship that other parent has with the child, and then the court has to
yeah,
get involved. But what I always tell any client that feels like their child is rejecting them or doesn't necessarily want the parent want to come over to their house because it's disruptive, then it's just be a steady presence, be there, but don't force it and don't ask them, pepper them with questions why. Just continue to be that steady presence so that they know that, let's say it's dad, they know that dad is going to be there for them and there's that security, and that they can say, Dad, I really don't want to go to your house tonight. And dad says, okay, that's fine. How about I just bring you to dinner and then I bring you back? And you're really recognizing that they have feelings and emotions and they're trying to process it. And it's really, really hard for them. And kids will always end up, for the most part, coming around. If you're that steady presence, though, they will come as the years go by. They will come around and recognize that you were not the one creating the conflict or saying the bad things. And it was just you were there for them and you were a rock to them. And it matters and it does circle back. So continue to be like, go high. If you have a spouse who's going low, you go high and you continue to
exactly.
stay in that high place. And on the other side of it, it will pay back. It will impact that relationship in a really positive way that you have with your children, even if it doesn't happen as quick as you want when you're kind of in that chaos.
Exactly, exactly. Now, what are some red flags that suggest financial abuse or cohesive control, and what should someone do immediately to protect themselves?
Yeah, so controlling, I mean, it's someone who's living it knows it. There
Yeah.
isn't a definition that defines that they know when they're living in that situation. Well, one of them being that they are being ostracized from family and friends, and so their spouse doesn't want them seeing family, seeing friends, and they're really isolating them
Mhm.
from seeing other people in their world, and that's a control thing. So someone who's controlling the money in terms of what you're spending and how often you are spending money and how much money you're getting and whether you have access to the finances, to the bills, to the accounts, whether you have to seek permission to access that money. Like those are signs of control.
Right.
Oh my gosh, there's the obviously the outside of verbal abuse and yelling. And so not all abuse has to be physical. Like there can be something as simple as a constant stream of disparaging.
Yeah.
Imagine someone saying things to you to make you feel little and make you feel small. And one of the examples I'll share my own personal story is when I was married in that second marriage, it was a very short marriage. It was less than a year from marriage to divorce. It was very toxic. And here I am a professional and a business owner. And on the outside, I had my stuff together. But on the inside, I had a spouse who was saying things to me like, I don't know why you bother going to the gym. Your ass is always going to be big, right? And you have someone saying stuff like that, it starts to impact you and it kind of chips away at your self-confidence and your
Yeah.
self-esteem. And it's not yelling, there isn't anything physical, it's just those little comments like that's
Yeah.
bad and that's toxic. And that's a reason for you to say, I don't accept this anymore. So it doesn't have to be these like massive signs that someone's waving to for you to say, okay, this isn't the right relationship for me, or this is a bad relationship, or it's toxic, and I'm not myself anymore. I don't even recognize myself, and that's how I felt. I looked in the
Right.
mirror. I didn't even know who I was in that short
Yeah.
period of time. That's how much damage someone can do to somebody else's psyche.
Oh, 100%. Now, if two people must keep living together during separation, what boundaries and ground rules make it
Mm.
workable?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, it's always hard when people are living together, and they're going through a divorce. There's this
Hmm.
compulsion to talk about the divorce and try
Yeah.
to talk about like what's going to happen on the other side. So don't do that. Especially, I would say whether you have lawyers or not, make sure that if you're talking about what's you're going to agree on or what life looks like, set some time aside to have that conversation and say we're going to sit down and talk about it now. We're not going to talk about it when someone's brushing their teeth or passing by or sitting there eating dinner. Like create some boundaries about when you're talking about those things.
Hmm.
I've seen some parents create some temporary parenting plans that while they're living in the same house, they're going to divide and conquer the duties. Who's responsible for the bedtime or making dinner, which is a really good exercise if you have one parent who traditionally hasn't done those things,
Right.
to start doing them in while you're still living together. And if you have a parent that's like who worked all the time or traveled all the time and now they want to be really proactive, it's like, okay, well, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you're going to do all the things that I have been doing because you say you want to do it. Like you need to know what this looks like if you're going to demand an equal parenting schedule. So you
Right.
can start to do things like that. And in that circumstance, it's always really hard for the parent who's always done all this stuff to kind of release control that
Yeah.
it's being done. It might not be done your way or the perfect way or the way that you think is the best way, but it's still being done. So it's important to really be intentional about kind of letting go of the control of that and saying, okay, does it matter if the bedtime routine happened in a little bit of a different order than what we're used to? The bedtime routine still happened. The teeth were still
Hmm.
brushed and the child is sleeping. Mission
Yeah.
accomplished. So it's getting comfortable for both sides for a new normal.
Oh, I like that answer. That's really good. Now, after the papers are signed, how do you help clients reinvent their identity without getting stuck in the past?
Oh, so good. Um it's because it was something like this is something that I experienced on my first divorce, quite frankly. And My ex is who I have a child with, and we co-parented beautifully. And I have, it was just we were two different people, and we got married
Right.
young. But I didn't know who I was on the other side of that. And
Yeah.
so for me, being a writer, I hadn't written in years. And it was like, I'm going to tap into that thing that I loved to do and
Yeah.
just doing that again. And so it's like, think about the thing that you put on hold. And for some people, like someone has a goal to run a marathon and they stopped running. Well, you start doing that on the time that you don't have your child, because a lot of times you'll have like sometimes moms who miss their kids and they're trying to figure out what do I do with all of this time now. Start doing something for yourself. Start tapping into those goals or that bucket list that you really wanted to do and just do it and do it messy and do it imperfectly and sign up for the class, even if you can't get to all of them, sign up for the race, start writing, like just start doing that to start to reacquaint yourself with who you are. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I love telling people to do, and I actually still love to do myself, is take yourself out on a date by yourself. Like go to a really nice dinner by yourself. You know how many people don't know how to dine without
Yeah.
their phones in there? Like it's so, especially with phones, like it's so easy for us to sit there and take up time by scrolling, but don't do that. Resist the urge, keep it in your bag, and just sit there and have a nice dinner on your own and observe.
Yeah.
And then that becomes going to the movies by yourself. And that turns into going away for a weekend by yourself. Start to do things and get really comfortable about doing things independently. And there's so much like satisfaction about when you do these things, about you're like, yeah, I can do it. If I can do that, then I can do this next thing. Then I can buy the house by myself. I've got my
Yeah.
finances, and then it becomes you're creating this habit of independence.
I love that. Now, what is your 90-day financial reboot after divorce? Exactly what should someone set up first?
Yeah, so budget, know your numbers. And this is always for the people who do it and they're the finance people, this is easy. Like they don't need a reboot, they don't need any sort of guidance. But for
Yeah.
those who weren't the ones responsible for their expenses, you're gonna have to roll up your sleeves and start paying attention to them. And that
Yeah.
means looking at every statement that comes in, being meticulous about going through credit card statements and bank statements to see what you're actually spending money on. It's amazing when you do that and you're like, oh, I spent a lot of money on nothing. And
Yeah.
becoming really clear as to how much money do you have coming in, what are your bills that absolutely have to get paid, and then how much discretionary money, like really getting comfortable with numbers. Um,
Right.
Gather a team of financial professionals. Have an accountant that you don't just talk to in March of every year, like an accountant that you can have
Yeah.
maybe a couple meetings with to have that conversation, or maybe it's a financial advisor who you work with to say, okay, now your goal is to save for retirement, and how do you get to that plan? And really have some people on your team who you can turn to, but taking ownership of that and responsibility for it, of getting organized with it and not putting off those type of tasks just because you don't want to do it and it's not fun, because it never
Yeah.
is. Um,
Right.
it's also empowering. Like that's something really, really powerful, is to say, even though I've never had to do it, even though, and women particularly love to say, oh, I'm bad at numbers or math,
Yeah.
I don't like to do it, but even so, you're probably not. That's just been something that you've been saying for so long, or someone told
Yeah.
you that at some point, or some algebra teacher told you, that you weren't good with it. But really start to know that, and it's so powerful because you're creating that. I don't need to be in a marriage or relationship just because of the money part of it. So the next time when you start dating again, and maybe you find yourself married again, but you're making decisions based on what you know is right and not because there's a financial attachment to it.
I love that. Now, when someone starts dating again, what boundaries and safety practices do you want them to use from one day to the next?
Okay. So this is one that, like, trust your gut. Oh my God, trust your gut, because it isn't like do these one, two, three things, but you know when something feels off.
Yeah.
When I was getting married that second time, I knew on the morning of that something was off and something wasn't right. But there I was getting my hair and makeup done, and I
Yep.
eloped and I had my dress on. I'm like, well, here we are. What am I going to do now? So, I mean, looking back, hindsight, but
Yeah.
trust that, and that wasn't the first time, if I'm being really honest. There were multiple moments leading up to that, and I just kept saying, like, it's growing pains. We're getting to know each other. No, it should,
Yeah.
like, trust your gut. The minute that something feels off, have the
Yes.
conversation about it, see what their response is, and that's going to tell you a lot when you talk about something that feels really uncomfortable and how that person responds to you. So it's pay attention, observe. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. It's not you just
Right.
being crazy or sensitive or dramatic. It's probably legitimately something that's off.
Right. Oh, so true. I think so many people they forget to really focus on their gut. They always say that, your gut, your heart, and your brain are all made
Yeah.
of the same composition, but it's really your gut and your heart that really talk to you and sends messages to the brain. So many
Yep.
people think it's the brain, but the brain only controls 10%, and that's usually the realistic part of us. But the
Yep.
part that really gives us the answers that we need are in our gut and in our
Yep.
heart. And we really have to focus more on that or, and learn how to do that.
And the brain keeps you safe. And it
Yes.
tells you, it keeps you, it's all the reasons why you should or should not do something. It's like the safety. It's like you can't, all of the excuses. Like it's going to tell you you can't get divorced because people are going to judge you or you don't have enough money. It's going to be all of the practical things. But
Yes.
practicality has never really got anyone anywhere, I think, in terms of what they really want for life. It's like it's
Yeah.
the thing that you know inside of you that is like the whatever it is in your life when you're trying to make that decision. And I think that's a great point, Stacey. It's like what's making that decision? Is it your
Right.
brain making it, or it's like this drive and this like soul that's like pulling you towards it? And that
Yeah.
often, I would say every time is always the right decision.
Right. Exactly. Now, how do you co-parent with a high conflict ex that is, he does parallel parenting. He looks in the real life and he's
Yeah.
like, he's not really on board with you at all.
Yep. So it's always really challenging when you have someone like that. Um, the best thing you can do is control your own response to it because you're never going to be able to control them. You're never going to
Right.
control the narcissist or the high conflict co-parent, but you can control how you respond to them
Yeah.
and recognize that you won't allow things to trigger you and open up sort of the floodgates of more conflict and chaos. So when you
Right.
respond to things, you want to keep it very businesslike. You want to keep it to the facts. You don't have to respond to every fight you're invited to. You don't
Yeah.
have to reply to the name calling or the insults. You just can go silent on those things. For this reason, I created an app called Parent Copilot to help parents communicate with each other and help them sort of de-escalate when there's a parent who is high conflict and helping them to rephrase things and sort of removing the emotion of them having to respond. It's like you plug in the info and let the your parent co-pilot actually help you put together an appropriate response. But um, and I'd say pause before you reply too. If something comes in over your phone, it's okay to not reply for a few hours. There is nothing that says there isn't any parenting plan that says you have to reply in the first 60 seconds of getting something. You get to take a breath, pause, because most of us will write an angry response and then we take a
Yeah.
step back and you look at it and you're like, okay, let me hit delete and let me try to rewrite this in a different way. Document everything from a legal perspective, write down anything so that if you have to go back to court, you have a really good record of it as well.
That's a great idea. Now, what unique issues show up in gray divorce later in life, and how should people prepare for them?
So it's interesting because I've been doing this long enough to have people come back to me now at this point where they said, I consulted with you 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and we waited until the kids were off to college and now they're getting divorced. And that's kind of, they're entering this gray divorce, which is sad in and of itself because it was like, had you done this a dozen years ago, you would have already moved on in your life and you put your
Yeah.
own happiness on hold. But gray divorce has challenges because in the political climate, legal climate, we're not talking politics today, but in the legal climate right now, lifetime alimony has sort of disappeared from the landscape in courts.
Yeah.
And when you have a gray divorce, it becomes really tricky because you have people who are on the cusp of retirement. And if you have someone who has been the stay-at-home parent and doesn't have the career, it becomes a little bit of a harder conversation of what life looks like. What does financial security look like on the other side of that? So that's always a challenge because someone thinks, well, we've been married 30 years, I'll get lifetime alimony. And courts just aren't doing that. They're saying they could say alimony until this person retires. And what period of time is that? And then someone's
Yeah.
shocked to say, well, what do you mean I'm only getting alimony for 5 years when there's a 30-year marriage because that person's retiring? And you're dividing
Yeah.
all of the retirement accounts, so it would be double dipping if the other person had to pay alimony from their own funds. So, which
Right.
is another reason of like, if you know, don't delay because
Yeah.
that same person who waited a dozen years passed a dozen years of time in order to establish a little bit more financial independence, and they continue to stay in this situation that worked at the time as they were married an intact couple, but it's definitely a challenge. And then the other thing is everyone thinks you wait until your kids are old and you have adult kids and it's a lot easier for them. It is not. It is
Right.
really hard for adult kids as well because what happens is maybe you weren't telling your 8-year-old all of the juicy adult details, but all of a sudden when they're in their 20s, parents feel like they can say the things they would have never said before. And now you have adult children feeling the burden and worried about their parents.
Right.
So it's also being mindful that even though they're adults, they're still your kids, and you still have to kind of protect them from some of
Yeah.
those conversations and information.
100%. Now, how do you ask for a prenup without ruining the romance? Like, what exact words do you recommend?
So, um, this is interesting because I think a prenup has actually nothing to do with the legal document. I think a prenup has to do with having money conversations before anything ever becomes a problem, and that's the greater benefit here.
Hmm.
And because a lot of times money is a big problem in marriages, and people will say we always had money issues. And a lot of
Yeah.
times in that situation, they haven't actually had a conversation about money. Maybe someone's a spender, someone's a saver, and they're not. They're one person is has resentment because of their spouse is the other way. Maybe
Yeah.
someone has debt, and if you're having that conversation before you get married, then everything's on the table and you can decide how you're going to deal with that. You can decide, okay, for the saver, how much money do they need to save in order to feel really comfortable? And then how much money is discretionary that the spender can also set aside for their spending to feel like they're not depriving themselves. And that's the bigger gain of a prenup.
Yeah.
Having that conversation then and yeah, like, listen, it stinks. No one wants to talk about what flowers are we using, and hey, are we going to waive alimony in a prenup? Like, it is unromantic, but marriage, the reality of it is, in order to have a long-lasting marriage, there has to be communication. It has to be open, and you're just setting things up for a future success of having uncomfortable, hard conversations. And you start doing that now, it becomes a lot easier later on. And hopefully, you never have to think about it again. But if there's significant assets, if there's generational wealth,
Yeah.
if a second or third marriage and you have kids from a previous marriage, a prenup is absolutely a conversation you're going to want to have
Right.
with your spouse to decide whether it's appropriate or not.
Exactly. That's a great answer. Now, when does a post-nup make sense and how should someone bring it up?
Yeah, so a postnup for your listeners, what a postnup is essentially a prenup that people didn't get around to doing, and they decide they're already married. And we just had this recently. They were getting married in a month, and we're like, listen, it's under duress, like it's too soon. We're not doing this. Come back after you're married, after you're home from your honeymoon, settled in, then we can do a postnup. So it's a contract. It's saying now that we're on the other side of we're married, this is what we would do if things weren't going to work out. I've seen people do this multiple years in their marriage, and maybe it's like things are starting to not look good and they're going to go to marriage counseling and they decided we're going to do a postnup. So we're talking about these things and then continue to work on our marriage. I've also seen postnups get thrown out of court because of how they were drafted and some sort of legalities behind it, but it's the same thing except you've already walked down the aisle.
Right, exactly. Now, how do we talk to teens about divorce and social media so they say safe and respectful? Because a lot of times you see a lot of stuff out there that is just like big news is just bombarded all over the place, and
Yeah.
bad advice is bombarded all over the
Oh
place.
yeah. So social media it's a good point to bring up. Just generally speaking, do not, if you're the people going through the divorce, do not write a thing about your divorce on social media. Don't talk about your soon-to-be ex. Don't disparage them. Don't flash pictures of your new boyfriend or girlfriend. Don't
Hmm.
do anything, and it will come back to bite you. It will absolutely
Yes.
come back. I had a case, there was a custody action and there was a dispute, and dad was actually saying that mom wasn't around during her parenting time. And lo and behold, mom was posting all of the photos from all of her salsa lessons and her nights out in the salsa clubs the night that she had custody. So when she went to court and said, "What are you talking about?" We had all of the proof that she actually was not around for any of her parenting time. So what you post will, I mean, if you think about this, don't post anything you don't want a judge to see. That those are rules of
Exactly.
social media. And then, teenagers, oh, I mean, the teenage use in social media and phones and all of that so hard. It's so important for both parents to try to be on the same page as to
Yeah.
rules with that, setting some boundaries up with that, because you don't want your kids to see anything that you're posting about your ex, and you don't want your kids to see a whole lot on social media
Yeah.
and having some of the same rules that the phone goes down in the kitchen in both houses and because kids will manipulate and use those rules
Yeah.
and say, well, dad doesn't make me do that, but mom does, so I'd rather spend more time with dad. I mean, kids do that. So
Oh, yeah.
really important to try as much as possible to be a united front on those things.
It blows my mind. A lot of times, like, I don't go on social media as much anymore, but
Yeah.
when I do go on there, sometimes I see people, they put their whole life story on there, and I can't understand why. Why do you want
I
the whole
know.
world to know what's going on in your private life?
I just saw it was probably about a month ago. It was some quote unquote influencer in my state going on a rant about whatever was happening in the courts, and she's doing video after video after video. And I so badly wanted to message her and say, please don't do that. You are not
Yeah.
helping your case. You are hurting yourself. Like this is and it's sometimes too much is too much on there, and fight the urge just to get in that situation, because she had a following, she had all these people like validating her feelings, and it
Yeah.
was like a palm to forehead moment. I'm like, they're not the ones making the decision, and this is
Exactly.
not going to look well at all on you in court if this is the stuff that comes in, and it's gonna
Yeah.
it hurts, and judges see it, and it impacts how they make decisions and can severely impact parenting time.
Oh, 100%. Now, what is your simple framework for negotiating holiday schedules and big decisions without a blow up?
So get ahead of the conversation early. So first of all, make sure in your divorce agreement or your parenting plan that you have as much detail as possible, so that once
Mhm.
it's done, you refer back to this document. If the two of you want to be flexible and switch, fine. But if you can't reach that agreement, you refer back to this, and on odd years mom has and even years dad has, and it's all laid out. So that's the first thing. But
Yeah,
if you have a parenting plan that's a little bit more loosey goosey, you're going to want to start that conversation early enough. Even like let's talk about the holiday time where I've seen conflict over each parent rushing to get the gift, right? The main gift. And it's
yeah,
start to create like even a Google sheet, a shared sheet where it's like you start to track, here's what I'm buying, the other parent puts it in so there aren't crossover. I mean, it's happened in my situation, even with my son, where you had a grandparent and somebody else buy the same gift because they weren't comparing notes. I mean, it just happens.
yeah.
We're going to try to
Hmm.
eliminate that. So it's having that communication and recognizing that, like, let's say for a holiday, isn't necessarily about the day. Like kids remember how they felt and they remember
Yeah,
moments. They don't remember that that thing happened on that particular day. So like for a birthday, kids aren't going to necessarily remember that their birthday party was not on their birthday. They're going to remember that their birthday party was awesome and they did so much fun stuff and it was great.
yeah,
And I guarantee you they couldn't tell the difference whether it was the Saturday before or the day of. So
yeah.
focus on your kid's experience and not about getting
Right.
that win and having that.
Oh, 100%. Now, when emotions spike and uncertainty takes over, what is 1 minute recess that could help people respond instead of react?
Yeah, just walk. I mean, walk away. Put your phone down. Walk away. If it's a face-to-face conversation, you say, "Can we pause and just come back to this until
Yeah,
we can cool down a little bit?" Like
yeah,
you can say, "Listen, I'm really emotional. I'm having an emotional reaction, and I don't want to respond that way. So can you give me a half hour, and then we can regroup and come back and have this conversation?" Um,
hmm,
and taking ownership of it if like I don't want to react, and
yeah,
rather than saying you're reacting and you're the one, like sometimes you just take the I don't know, you call it the hip, but take the like
yeah,
responsibility, ownership of the feelings happening. If it's a text or email, you don't respond right away. Like write the answer that you really want to send and then delete that
yeah.
one and then write the one that de-escalates the situation and is very business-like, something that is void of emotion.
I love that answer. Now, during separation, what digital safety steps should someone take with passwords and two-factor authentication
Oh,
and shared
great question.
accounts?
Yeah, great question. Um, so you're going to want to secure all of that stuff. Usually courts so you can't lock somebody out of an account. Nobody can do it. And
Yeah,
if someone does that, there's things that can happen and you go to court and get access to all of that. But you certainly want to secure passwords, like even logging into social media accounts or your personal bank accounts. And maybe you go in and you change all of it if you think your spouse has that information, even
yeah,
access to your phone, whatever you have that's yours personally, absolutely go in and change those things. I know that there's sometimes people have concerns about spyware on phones.
yeah,
And that's something that exists now, and I don't even know the full extent of what technology is capable of in that, but there's
yeah,
certainly those, and there's experts who will do like a kind of a cleanse of everything and make sure that nothing is on your phones, and they'll take a look at it. So if it's at that level, I would say bring in an expert who knows what to look for and to make sure that things aren't being watched that way. Because I've seen it happen where every text was like documented and the other person got access to it. Yeah.
wow,
I mean, and
wow,
then if you're the person doing that, like if that doesn't play well for you and going in court, like why you
yeah,
think that you have a gotcha moment,
yeah.
the judge is not going to be happy that that's happening.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's 100% true. You also are an author. Now, can you tell us a little about your book?
Yeah, so I've been a writer forever. It's the thing that just lights me up. So I'm actually a fiction writer and a nonfiction writer. And when I was on my writing journey, I really wanted to be traditionally published. I got an agent, and we didn't sell my fiction book, but what we did
Mhm.
sell was a personal development book that was nonfiction called She Who Wins. And I wrote this book as I took the framework of how do you help someone when they're trying to make a really hard decision and
Yeah,
um, trying to take action for something that's terrifying to them. How do they do that?
yeah,
So I created a framework, but I also filled the pages with a lot of personal stories, some humor, some sadness, some
yeah,
embarrassing stories. And I can't say it's a memoir, but I definitely throw myself on the line here.
yeah.
And wrote that book. It's called She Who Wins, so it's really from a female perspective, but I've had many men read it as well and say that there were stories and things that resonated with them as well. So that came out in 2023, and we have another fiction book that I just finished writing that hopefully will see the light of day in the in the future. We'll see.
I love it. Now, if people wanted to find your book, where could they find it?
Amazon is, they can get it there. Barnes and Noble, they can get it. If you can just Google She Who Wins, and it shows up a bunch of independent bookstores.
Now, tell us about the services and the different things that you provide.
Yes. So my law firm is full service. We do all divorce, custody. We have divorce coaching for really helping someone make that decision on what next for them if they're not quite ready. And
Yeah,
divorce coaching can really be anywhere. That doesn't have to be just Connecticut. While the law firm services are Connecticut based, the coaching is really national.
yeah.
Um, and we do writing prenups and postnups. And then I'm also a keynote speaker, so I do that. A lot of women's empowerment events is kind of
Mhm.
what I love doing, and speaking to women who are kind of in that place of trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah,
And whether it's corporate or just women who are sort of at a crossroads of
right.
what are they looking for in their kind of second half of their life.
Oh, I love that. Now, where can people find you?
Yes. So Instagram is kind of where I hang out for social media. So that's at Ms. Renee Bauer. And then if anyone is looking for any divorce resources, it does not have to be Connecticut specific. We do have a divorce workbook that is like 80 pages long. That is all of the information to start to wrap their head around what they need to do and how to prepare and what they have to start thinking about.
Right.
And you can get that on our law firm website, which is familylawyerct.com. Totally free. You can just go and download it.
Oh, I love that. Now, we actually promised the listeners that you were going to give five concrete actions. Would you please share five things that they could do this week to move from confusion to clarity?
Okay, perfect. I love this. I'm going to take this right from the framework for my book. So, number one is they're going to stop and assess what is driving their decision. So, is it their head or their heart? We talked about this, and really identifying what it is that their heart or gut wants and dismissing what their head is telling them. So, stop and
Right.
assess what their heart wants. Number two is to drop their excuses. I want them to identify the things holding them back and write them
Yes.
down so they can see them on paper, because they are excuses and we all have our own unique brand of BS that shows up for us.
Yes.
You have to identify them and look at them and acknowledge them. And
Mhm.
then they're going to write down an action step or steps. I would say write down a couple steps that they're going to take this weekend in order to move forward or move themselves out of stagnation. So
Right.
write down those steps and be very clear about what that step is and when they're going to do it. So
Mhm.
be write down the date, stick it on a post-it note, and follow through with that. Then release all control and recognize that things are not going to work out exactly as they have planned, and
Right.
recognize that Sometimes the universe, I like to think, knows what we need more than we think we know what we need.
Yeah.
And so it's releasing control. So it's stop, drop, roll, and release, and then just breathe and have some grace with yourself. And nothing, it doesn't always have to be perfect. It can be messy and it can be hard and you can cry and
Mhm.
that it doesn't have to feel good all the time. It's just allow yourself to feel all of the things that you're feeling as you make these decisions because they're really hard.
Oh, I love that advice. Oh, this has been amazing, Renee. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed all the advice you gave. You gave such great wisdom and knowledge. And, this is a topic that is really hard for people. They don't, either, like you said, they feel shamed or they're unsure, they're confused, they don't know what to do. And they hear, conflicting, advice. So they're really up in the air about a lot of things. And you really provided some concrete information to help people really get on the right path. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all this great advice.
Well, thank you, Stacey, for sharing your platform with me and for asking great questions. And absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Well, you have a great day, and I really appreciate you.
You too.